It's there. People know. Every one of us has intuition. Every single one of us.
Yeah.
As long as you are breathing,
Yeah.
that intuition is there. It is reteaching that child how to do what it automatically knew to do when it got here.
So something that you do so beautifully is working with generational
Mhm,
trauma and
mhm.
patterns.
I think the big piece is getting people to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go into that soul work of, where did I learn this? Let's just get curious. Who else does this? Why did they do this?
And when
Yeah.
we slow down as humans, you then start becoming more in touch with what you're feeling. Then you have some idea of how, oh, wait, this is what I need to do.
And I think we're just at a beautiful time. We're in an energy where people are being reintroduced to themselves and
Yeah.
reintroduced to their bodies in a new way. And I would just encourage anybody to ride the wave. And if you're new to it, this is a beautiful place to start, is using this model.
So welcome to the Michelle Chalfant Show. I feel like I need a drum roll.
I know.
LaShonda Walker. LaShonda Walker in the house, everybody.
I'm excited on the Michelle Chalfant show. Woo!
Yes,
Talk
ma'am.
about evolving. I love it. I'm here for it.
I
I
love it.
know.
So this is the Michelle Chalfant Show, life from the adult chair. And because you do that so well, I'm like, we gotta have you on the show. Let's hear about
Oh,
it.
I'm always happy to be here and support your work, Michelle.
Thank you.
It is truly a life-changing model for sure.
Well, you have taken this model and you have woven it throughout your whole entire life. And that, listening to you speak about how you use the adult chair in your home life, which you have some phenomenal stories, at home
Yeah,
with children, with family,
yeah,
and then even at work with yourself. How do you use that? People obviously have known about the adult chair for many years, and now that the book is
yeah.
out, people are really talking about it more than ever. But I wanted to have you on to talk about, like, how do you apply this into your life? And yes, you did go on to become a coach a few years ago, but I just love hearing you talk about how you live this model. And so
Mm,
many people talk about this. It's not just something you learn and you move on from. It's
yeah,
the type of thing where you learn it and then you apply it and you live this
yeah,
model, and
yeah.
you don't retire from it. You integrate it into your life. So,
Yeah, it definitely evolves. It's a model that is designed for it. I say it goes in steps. So it's the introductory of it. For
mhm.
me, that was the podcast. I want to say about a good year, just really being saturated in the episodes. I've talked about it before. I was in a small little office at the time, and just it was very stressful. And so I usually would have it on like at work, on my breaks. And so just diving into it that way. And then when I really became curious about the coaching thing, I didn't even know that coaching was a thing. I wasn't even trying to be a coach. I was like, oh no, I need to figure out how she does this for real, for real. And then becoming a coach and going through the training, it became a thing where it was embodied in my life because growing up, I was always a very sensitive child. It's so funny to be on this side of my life. When you talk a lot about intuition. There were things that I intuitively knew as a child. Like I just knew these things, right? And a lot of things I was talked out of. I was denied. I was told one of the biggest things I always heard was when I got emotional was to get thicker skin. That's very much like a cultural protection mechanism. Stop being so sensitive. So I had to spend most of my life denying this very true and authentic part of myself. So to be introduced to the adult chair model, the inner child, the adolescent, and the adult, it truly changed the way I show up to where now it was funny. I was having a conversation with my husband the other day, and I was like, because the work never stops. Like there's always it's like these layers to it. It really is. It's like these layers to it. And I was telling him the other day, I was like, I've always known these things. Like he's known these things about me. And he's just looking at me like, girl, what are you going through? And I'm like, you remember, I would see certain things, or I would just feel certain things, or I know certain things. At the time, I didn't have language for it, right? But I just knew things. And when I got introduced to the model and introduced to emotions and feeling and into, I was like, I've always known this. And so when you reconnect to that part of yourself and you heal that part, it just naturally becomes a part of how you flow. Like it's not a, it's funny because I've introduced the model to my family. My immediate family, my children are familiar with it. My husband is familiar with it. We use the language at home.
Mhm.
And so I've also introduced it to my family. And so they're still working. They're still working on it. But just to have the language for our feelings and our emotions, and when we show up in relationship with each other. I was telling the group, our tech coaches earlier today, that it's down to like in the group chats and family conversations, if somebody shows up kind of funky, somebody in the family will say, well, we see you woke up and chose your adolescent chair today. You strapped in, didn't you? You like, I'm gonna buckle in and I'm gonna ride this out today. And so now it's to the
Love
point
that.
where it's to the point where everybody in the family knows what you're saying. So it's kind of like how we even check each other, like, wait a minute, who are you talking to? What's happening? Like, who's here? Who's present right now? Let's find our adult. Let's find our adult chair. And so it's a part of our life now. And it was a new thing to be able to have understanding for your emotions, things that were happening in your body, triggers, and to be able to now put language to what you're experiencing. It just becomes a natural part of your life. And so that's what it has been for me and my family with
Mm.
my children.
Mhm.
I have two teenagers, and so we are deep, 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 deep in adolescent. Like,
Yes, you are.
woof, my. But it's helped me parent them through the adolescent, even serve as a mentor for their friends. I last year I spent time going to my daughter's school. My daughter's a theater kid, and so it's all the drama. It is just plus age. And one day, one of the girls, it was the day of a show, and one of the girls just had a panic attack in the middle of the cafeteria, like just started crying. Like 1 minute we were all just talking like normal, next minute she's just like crying.
Mm.
So her friends surrounded her, and I just sat with her, right? And let her take a couple deep breaths and just started asking her, like, okay, what's going on? And she's like panicking about this song she has to sing, totally in story, like completely in story. So I was able to just walk her through, okay, well, what is true for what you know about going into this show? Like,
Mm.
have you rehearsed? Do you know your lines? Do you know the words to the song? And so that's what it looks like,
Mm.
just incorporating it every day. It's not always a session with a client. It is a real life, moment by moment, situation by situation application.
It's what you just said that you were when you were working with your daughter's friend. I mean,
Mhm.
the power of just asking, "Hey,
Yeah.
hold on." I mean, in a nutshell, you were asking her what's fact and truth. Like, let's go through all the things that are factual. It
Yeah.
really does pop us out of those things like anxiety or even panic.
Oh,
It regrounds us, doesn't it? Like it changes everything.
yes, and it's especially very helpful in even in adolescent situations working with teens, because teens love a story. Oh, she doesn't like me. They don't like me. And so when you start asking them, okay, well, oh, what? She doesn't like you, girl. She has, what did she say? Well, I just know that she doesn't like me. Oh, okay, and they don't like me. Well, who is they? Them. Okay, but okay, give me a name, like specifically. So when you start, even teenagers, you start walking them through like this, then they're like, oh, oh, it's not a problem at all. Like, no, you made up that whole thing in your head. And so I love this model, even especially for young people, because if you can teach somebody early on how to begin to challenge those adolescent behaviors, they're light years ahead of their peers when they truly do become adults, because then they already have the tools. But for most of us, we're just now getting the tools. So that's why I'm really big on, even with my kids, I'm like, oh no, no, no. Oh no, no. Let's figure out what's really happening here. Let's,
What's fact and truth?
yes, yes, yeah,
It's
very
true.
much.
It takes the power from our ego self. And it's so boring though sometimes, right? It's like that ego can build, like you said, the drama. It's like so great when we're in that adolescent chair and it's like, wait, it's so boring when I'm just in fact and truth, but it brings us peace, right?
Whew. Let me tell you, when you talk about peace, Michelle, I, if you don't get anything else out of this model, the peace is next level. It's a different kind of, and we've talked about this before, Michelle.
Yeah.
Knowing my background, I grew up in a very religious, spiritual background. So we hear these things, right? We
Mhm.
quote scriptures about them. We say, but I never really knew we were told to walk in peace. We were told to forgive. We were told to do all these things growing up, but nobody ever really gave us step-by-step instructions on how to do that and what that looks like and how you get to peace. So when you can use this model and learn things like boundaries, like what is that? Like boundaries. Like speaking of when I said that I've always known certain things, it's funny, a couple of years ago, I had a friend of mine from high school. We had reconnected and he had shared with me, he was like, you know what, you taught me boundaries in high school. I said, I knew boundaries in high school. I was like, bro, what? I knew boundaries in high school. And it was like, it's these things that you knew as a kid, right? As you knew as a, but you push that intuition down. You say, let me fit in. What character do I need to be? How do I need to show up for people to like me? And then you have these things that start coming back to you like, oh, I did know how to set boundaries. I may not have had the word boundaries or the language, but
Mhm.
the behavior I knew. And that even that reconnecting to those parts of yourself, my gosh, the peace that comes with it, that you can just be like your relationships are totally different. People start
Mhm.
acting out around you and you're like, oh, you want to work that out. Or as my family says, woo, somebody somebody chose their adolescent today, but that has nothing to do with me. Whereas before we were kids that felt like it was our responsibility to
Right.
manage our parents' emotions or manage each other's emotions. Now
Mm.
we use this and we're like, oh, somebody's got some work to do. It's not my job. Like somebody has got some work to do. So it is very freeing. It is very peaceful in it. And it creates an environment where even in your home, everybody gets to show up as who they are, even when they're having their emotions, good, bad, or indifferent, right?
Right.
And it's just different. It's a very different model. It is.
You mentioned before about your intuition that you had, and then you realized you turned it off.
Yeah.
You felt, did you say that you felt your emotions or that you were told you were too sensitive? I hear
Yeah.
this all the time. So
Yeah.
when we're growing up, if we are quote unquote sensitive, which actually to me is a superpower because that's our
It
intuition,
is.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Ooh,
our
it's
intuition.
superpower.
And when we're told these things or shamed for these things, then we turn it down or turn it off. Like a dimmer switch is what I think about. It's like, let me just dim that light because that's not okay. I'm getting made fun of. I'm getting even yelled at sometimes when we're told, stop doing that. You're so annoying. You're so sensitive.
Mm.
So that was, again, you didn't, I don't know if you had shame or what your childhood experience was like around emotions and things of that nature, but how did you turn that around? What would you say to someone that's listening? Because I hear this, I'm not kidding you, on a regular basis
Yeah,
from
it's a real
people.
thing. It's a real thing. In the work that I've been doing, we kind of talked about this a little earlier, is I really had to get curious about the why. A lot of my turn it down was very much from childhood, my parents, very much my parents. And as I started doing this work and I started getting curious and I call it like pecking away at the egg. Like I would just peck, peck, peck. I would just
Mhm.
tap it just a little bit to test the waters with everybody.
Mhm.
And then I went full on to being a coach and introducing my family to it. It became a ask questions and get curious and hard conversations. For some, it will look like hard conversations of why. Why wasn't I allowed to? And only to learn from family, we were living in fear.
Mhm.
My mother came to the United States as an immigrant, so her mindset was assimilation and do what you have to do to survive. My father being from the South, it was a survival. So a
Mhm.
lot of that, and they knew I was sensitive. They won't say it out loud, but I'll tell the public. Both of them are sensitive. They both are. So
Mhm.
they had to turn it off for survival. And so their whole thing was let's teach her how to survive by turning it off too. And so as I really began to understand that, and it's baby steps with it. Like at first, you're like, I know this, but let me see if I really know. Even becoming a coach, like I'm telling you, Michelle, I had no intentions whatsoever even in talking to you about becoming a coach, I was like, it was going over my head. I was like, great, I just need these tools. I'm just like, I'd hit a wall. I was like, I'm just trying to survive. So to get into the program and then all that comes with the program, I didn't even know it until we were in South Carolina and I saw the work being done on the stage where all those emotions. And I was like, oh, do you remember me coughing like all the time? Like every
Yes. Yes.
doing stuff, I just started coughing. And I was like, what did I get myself into? Like, what is this?
It was your fifth chakra, right? It was
It
like
was
speaking
like
up and you were
every
releasing. I
single
totally
time. Like
remember that. Yes.
and it was just so embarrassing because of course, growing up in church, you're like, why is this girl coughing in the middle of prayer? Like we try to have a sacred moment. But it was in those watching it, seeing people connect to those parts of themselves and in seeing those connections happen, witnessing that
Mm.
freedom come and seeing people physically change to go up on the stage looking one way and coming off the stage looking totally different. I was like, what is this? And so for me, that's how it was like, okay, I'm in this. And for me, it was a safe space to be able to do it because everybody in there was in the same boat, learning and being vulnerable. And
Right.
so it was a safe space to begin to say, okay, I do have these feelings. I do have these emotions. How do I get language? And then one of the fellow coaches introduced me to the emotions wheels because
Yes.
she would ask me, how are you feeling? And I would say, good. And she was like, good is not a feeling. It's like, what? Who are you talking to? What do you mean it's not a feeling?
Of
And she
course it
was
is.
good is not a feeling. And so she was like, here, put these cards in your wallet. So then I'm walking around with these emotions cards. So
Mm,
now I have words. Like I have these at least starter words to say, oh my God, this is what this comfortable feeling is. And this is what this uncomfortable feeling is. And then the process of understanding the feeling. And then what do I need? Oh, I need understanding. Oh, I need space. Oh, I need respect. Oh, what are your needs? And that was just revolutionary to me because again, growing up, what like my aunt always says, you take what you take and you don't, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. So you grow up believing that. And then you get to this place, this adult space in your life where you're like, no, I'm just going to settle for that anymore. Let's challenge that. So it is definitely opened up my world to experiencing myself as an adult woman in my adult body, in my adult chair. Not that there's not triggers and things that happen, but being able to even just slow myself down and say, wait a minute,
yeah.
what year is it?
Right? We work
What just
those
happened?
triggers, you're saying. Talk
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how you work triggers now compared to in the past.
Yeah. So triggers now are so different. One of the things that I've learned is just embodying is trusting your body. When you feel immediately when you feel. And so one of the most profound is situations where I found myself having a trigger was years ago at work. And I was in the middle of a annual evaluation. I recently talked about it at a conference and the supervisor was like going through all the things that I did great. And then there was that one point where it's like, now let's talk about the things you need to improve on. And I just had a breakdown. Like I just literally like started crying and I was like, what is going on? And so that example is one of the things that using the model helped me work through why that happened. And so now the biggest thing I pay attention to is my body. Like when I feel that that something in your chest or that something in your stomach where you feel like this like shake for me, it's like a physical reaction. I don't ignore my body anymore. I
Mm,
do listen to my body and I, slow down and ask, okay, what are you trying to tell me? What's going on? Is this about right now? Or is something else coming up that's reminding me of another situation? So I always am way more aware of my body and what my body is doing. Whereas before I was told, don't pay attention to that. We're not worried about that. Yes, we
right.
are. We
Yes,
are.
we are.
Yes.
We live chin up, most humans, right? We're not connected to that body part at all.
No, no, no. And the more you can teach people, I've recently started teaching more about the nervous system. In
Mm,
some of the communities that I speak in,
hmm
emotions is very, very new, very new. Can also feel a little bit woo-woo, like
hmm
girl, stop. But
Right.
when you bring people back to fact, like let's start with your body, let's start with your nervous system, let's start with that autonomic part of
Mm,
your nervous system that is automatically going into fight, flight, freeze. What is that telling you? And so when you bring people even down to that foundational level, they may not be able to have words for their emotions, but when you can bring that science into it of, now I'm not making this up, there's all this research that you can go and see. And even just introducing people to their body parts through this process, I got introduced to my vagus nerve. Nobody told me I had a vagus nerve growing up. I was like, what? A whole system in your body that's
yep.
designed to
Yep.
teach you and to speak to you. And so being able to even bring it down to that level for people is it opens up the door for people to be open, especially if they've never been open to emotions before or feeling. It's
Right.
like, oh, okay, that's what that is. Okay. Oh, that's what. So it's such a beautiful thing to watch people have these little moments that build on bigger moments for them.
How would you say that your parenting has changed? How do you show up differently with your children?
Yeah, wait, you want me to cry on this show, Michelle?
Yes, I do. You know, I love tears. You know, I encourage tears.
So
Mm, mm, mm,
my babies have space and permission to feel
mm.
unlike any generation before them.
Wow.
My kids have a voice.
Hmm.
Even my son, I have a boy and a girl.
Hmm.
Um, my daughter experienced some challenges this past school year, medical, and she was pushing herself way too much. She was following a pattern of pushing herself, and her
Hmm.
body started talking to her. And being able to give her permission and allowing her space to say, no, I've had enough. I'm going to take a break. I'm not
Hmm.
going to push myself. At 14, it's life changing because some of us didn't get that till our late 40s and 50s and 60s when we
Right.
were just at a breaking point. My son having awareness of his own emotions, his own feelings, and being able to have language for it. And just me as a person, I think that from when I started, started from how I came to know the chair was in parenting my son. He was little
Hmm.
and being introduced to the child chair and just even the family as a whole, not just our family, but our extended family, our church family, everybody now challenging these old traditional dynamics of how to raise children. Is it triggering for the generations ahead of us? Yes, it is
Hmm.
triggering, but it's been an opportunity to learn and to grow. I was talking to a friend of mine and telling her about it, and she's a grandmother, and she was like, "Oh my God, girl, I feel like we just need to get everybody on the phone and say, stop having babies. Everybody stop. Whatever it is you're doing, stop what you're doing. We need to have like a conference. We need to like have a meeting so we can like do better for the ones that are coming forward." And I just busted out laughing and said, well, that's an idea, girl, but we can start here. She said, because nobody told us this. We didn't
Yeah.
know. These are things that we didn't know. We had our grandparents and our parents had their own systems and ways of regulating. I
Hmm.
learned my grandmother had her own nervous regulation system where she would just sit on the porch and
Yep.
cross her feet and rock. That was how she regulated her nervous system. But she didn't have words, she didn't have language. So for my children to have it, it is definitely standing on the shoulders of generations before them to be
Hmm.
able to say you get to live differently than the rest of us did. So it's very different dynamic with my kids versus how it was for me growing up. And it's changed not just my parenting, but it's changed my relationships with my parents as well. We have
Mm.
a completely different relationship than we did before, and just openly talking about it and their openness to understanding the emotional and mental aspect of wellness. So it has been truly life changing all the way around for me.
Wow.
Mhm.
Speak a little bit more about your own parents. How has that
Yeah.
changed? I'd love to hear
Oh
that.
gosh, the language that it has get so whew, again, I'm not going to cry. Two completely different people, two completely different journeys,
Hmm.
but still, I think it was just opening the energy of being okay with emotions and understanding your emotions. For my mom, I was sharing with the TAC coaches earlier that when I started I have a podcast that I started, and I started off talking about the chairs.
Mhm.
And my family didn't know what I was getting into. They were like, "What is this girl doing?" But they know I'm that kid I'm just gonna be gone. Like, is she just out there somewhere? It's fine. She'll be okay. And so I launched the episode, and it was the introduction with the chairs.
Mm.
And my mom called me, and I was like, I saw the phone ring, and I was like, don't answer it. Don't answer it. Don't pick up. I was like, pick up this phone. She gonna text you, and then she's gonna call the police if you don't answer. Because that's just my mom is. So I answered. And she was like, girl, I listened to your little podcast. And I was like, okay, here we go. I was like, here we go. And she was very skeptical. She said, I was not going to listen. I just knew this was about me and, how I parented. And she said, oh my God, girl, was I in for a shock? And I said, okay. She said, I didn't even get through the whole show. I said, what are you talking about? The show's not that long. She said, I didn't make it through that inner child that you was talking about.
Oh,
I said, oh, the inner child. I said, well, what happened? She said, you started explaining the inner child. She said, baby, I went all the way back to kindergarten.
wow.
I was like, you did what? She said, literally, she's like, it was like a flashback. She said, I went to kindergarten, then I went to second grade, then I went to fourth grade, then I went to sixth grade. And like, she was like naming off all these teachers that were in those different grades. And she realized where her passion for advocating for the people that she felt were being mistreated came from. She's been like this her whole life, no clue. And she said, girl,
Wow.
take a break. I can't listen to any more of that show. I know you about to get into another chair, but I'm gonna have to deal with that other chair later because I'm still trying to deal with my kindergartner. And so I said,
Wow.
okay. So yes, introducing them to that. My dad, he has also had to take a different approach. He's prior military, he's retired Army. So it's
Mm.
rough and
Yep.
tough and it's
Yep.
straight no chaser, right? Like all the time. And there's been space, excuse me, for him as well to really understand why connecting to your emotions is so important, particularly when it comes to your physical health and how unprocessed emotions have an effect on your bodily organs, the way your body moves as you get older. And so it has just been an introduction for the whole family. And so I'm just happy that everybody has the language and they're understanding the chairs a little bit more. But everybody loves the adolescent. Yes, everybody
Right.
loves the adolescent. Everybody's like, because they're realizing, oh my God, people don't realize how powerful that 7 to 24-ish time
Yeah.
frame is before that prefrontal cortex comes online. And nobody's taught us this before. We've just been unconsciously moving through life and survival and repeating patterns and just doing what we thought was the right thing to do. But when
Right.
you have language, my God, language and understanding with definitions totally changes everything and how you see things.
Changes everything. I remember with my own mom learning all this work. And I remember she was out visiting me in Nashville a few years ago before we moved back here to Charlotte. And I snapped at her and I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry that I did that. She's like, it's fine. I said, no, 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 no. Let's
Yeah.
talk about setting boundaries, you know. And I really went through the chairs and I talked about how we set boundaries and you don't let people talk to you. I'm telling her to set a boundary with me. Not that I raged on her, I just like snapped at her. She's like, well, you're tired. I said, you don't know what's going on with me. Fact is, you know,
Mm.
so it was this whole education, you know, and I
Yeah,
went into the chairs and I went into a whole thing around boundaries. She's like, oh my God. I mean, self worth, the whole thing. And it was so enlightening. It was so,
it
and she
is.
still brings it up to this day. You
It
helped me
is.
so
It
much that
changes.
day. And then
Yeah.
they build on it, our
They
parents, don't
do.
they?
And you know what too? I don't know if your mom experiences, but they also begin to pull on things that they knew, but they were told that's not, you shouldn't pay attention to that. And they're like, no, 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 I always had a feeling. It is this generational healing that it brings
Yeah.
this new awareness, even like down to when I was doing some generational work and I discovered my grandmother and the rocking with her feet crossed.
Yes.
Flashback growing up, I watched my dad do that every day when he came home from work. He would lay on the couch and he still does it to this day. And I was like,
Wow.
Dad, do you know what that is? And he's like, I was like, after being at work all day and stressed, that's how my father regulated his nervous system.
Get out of here.
And when we talked about it, he was like, Oh, he said, because that's what helps him to calm
Calm
down.
down. Yeah, yeah. You're
Yeah,
crossing the
it's
left and
cleaning
right
all that stuff
hemisphere and
out of your body because he's not a big talker. Like that's just
yeah,
not my dad. But
yeah.
he will, when you see him in that chair with that foot going, give him a moment.
That's so beautiful though. Isn't
Yeah,
it
and he
wild?
learned what he. I said, "Where did you get that from?" He said, "I don't know. I watch my mama do it all the time, and he just does it." Yeah,
There you go. So we
we know
absorb
that's
everything
narcissism.
around us. We
Yep,
don't even know what we're
you
absorbing,
don't
and then
even
we're
know
doing
it. So, yep,
ourselves.
you don't even know it. It wasn't until I gave him language. I said, "You know, that's how you regulate your nervous system," and he was like, "What?" I say, "Yeah." I say, "Yep. Welcome to the club,
Yeah,
sir.
no kidding.
Welcome."
So something that you do so beautifully that is so needed in the world is working with generational
Mhm,
trauma and
mhm.
patterns. Talk a
Yeah,
little bit about that because that is something that we as humans need to have a better understanding about. And then
yeah.
what might we do? How do we know that we might be even in it? Because I realize most people don't even know that they're in it.
Yeah, most of us don't because we are moving through unconsciously. For me, it became an awareness when I started parenting. And
Mhm.
then even as I got older, just doing certain things that,
Mhm.
you say, you see your parents do certain things, or, you say, I'm not going to do that when I grow up. And then when you grow up, you're like, oh, I just did. And so in working with my clients, usually they'll come in for something that has nothing to do with their parent or anything. And then it's not until you start peeling back those layers and just asking questions. I just tell people, get curious. Where did you learn this? Where did you first see this? Where did you first experience? I worked with a client one time that she had that situation of overproducing and overgiving and just running herself into the ground. And I said, well, who did this? Who did you see do this? And she was in a moment where she was slowed down and she was in her body. And she said, my grandmother. And I said, okay. I said, well, maybe that worked for her. She said, no, it didn't. She didn't like it either. I said, okay,
Mm.
why are we doing it? And it is getting, I think the big piece is getting people to slow down.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can't tell you how much comes up when people just slow down. And sometimes you need somebody to guide you through slowing down because most of us don't know how to slow down. I had to spend a lot of time with some of our TAC coaches. I spent many, many, many sessions with TAC coaches, going back and forth to sessions and learning what it is to slow down, right? And what it is to talk to your body and ask it what it's asking you for, asking it what it needs.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when we're looking at that through a generational lens, I often, when we're doing what I call our soul work, is we'll go through the session. I pay attention to certain keywords, certain key things that come up. And then we go into that soul work of where did I learn this? Let's just get curious. Who else does this? Why did they do this? And when you start to look at it through that lens, I think one of the biggest things that has come out of it with several clients that I've worked with who came into session with deep, 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 big mother wounds, deep,
Mhm.
deep
Yeah.
mother wounds to transition from this mother womb and it just resentment and just hatred and anger towards their mother to such a profound grace for these women, despite everything that happened to them. It's a different type of freedom seeing that. And seriously, Michelle, it is using the model. It is
Yeah.
helping
Yeah.
them get back to their inner child, helping them work through their adolescent. Okay, what do you think it was like for your mother when she was a child? What do you think it was like for her when she was an adolescent? And it brings this humanity to their experience. It brings this sense of it wasn't personal to me.
Yes. Yes.
It
Yeah.
wasn't personal to me because that's what we walk away with. We walk away thinking that it was personal to me, that I was the problem, I was the
Mhm.
one that was wrong. But when you can slow down and really do your own healing work, and I truly believe in generational healing that you heal seven behind you and seven ahead of you. And I see it. I see
Yep.
it with my own family. I see it with my own children. I see it with my extended family because I think that that's important. We love to talk about generational curses and generational patterns. It's big in the culture that I grew up in, or
Mhm.
generational curses, especially. I
Mhm.
don't
Yeah.
typically care for the term generational curses, even though I grew up in religious environments that did, because sometimes what happens with that and I've seen it in my experience, is that when we use the term curses, it gives this sense of it's something outside of us that we can't control, that we don't have any power over, that we just have to take whatever it happens and go with the flow. But I think when you shift language to generational patterns, there is a sense of ownership and empowerment that if this is a pattern that's been started, it's a power that I can change. It's a pattern that I can change. It's not some outside thing. And a
Mm.
lot of it is emotional. It is how
Yes.
can we better regulate emotionally? I was at a conference recently, and after the conference, one of the ladies came up to me and she was just like, no, how is this even happening? And I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, I'm the one in the family that I'm always doing it. And if I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So where'd you learn that from? And I just slowed her down for a second. Where'd you learn that from? I said, who'd you see do that? She said, my mother did it. I said, and how's that working for you? And she started crying and she said, you know what's crazy? This is why I'm talking to you. She said, right before I wasn't even going to come to this conference, but right before I came to this conference, my daughter's been going to therapy. She told me, Mom, we can't keep doing this. This is not working. And she's like, what are you talking about? She said, we can't keep projecting our emotions on each other and calling it love and relationship. That's not what this is. And I was like, hmm.
Dang.
Your daughter said that? She
Yeah,
was like, I know we need something different. I said, yeah. I said, it's just an invitation. I said, it's not a shame thing. And I think I, for people who are concerned about shame, because sometimes when it comes to looking at patterns of behavior that are often unhealthy, dysfunctional, toxic, whatever word you want to use, one thing I love about this model is it really does free you of the shame language and get you into you were just protecting yourself.
definitely.
It was the only way you knew to protect yourself. But my mom, she always says, I taught you things and I taught you ways. She said, but when I learned a better way of doing it, it is my responsibility then come back and teach the new lesson, right? And that's what generational healing is about. Sometimes it's going to come for your kids saying, this isn't, what are you doing? And this is a generation that is empowered to say, we're not doing that. We're not, no, like that's not going to happen. And so when you can sit with yourself first and foremost and slow down
Hmm.
and really find compassion and grace for yourself, it just opens up the door for you to find the same for everybody else in your family who was also just surviving like you were.
So well said.
Mhm.
I think about all the patterns that are passed down, healthy ones and unhealthy. I think about your father
Yeah.
that's doing what his mother did to regulate his nervous system. But then I think about in my own life growing up, in the summer we lived with my grandmother and my uncle, and there was a ton of drinking. And I remember I can still, LaShonda, I can see looking at my dad, and he had a bourbon in his hand, and it was 4 o'clock because that was what during the summer that's what you did on Friday nights at the lake. Everyone they had parties all the time. More my grandmother and uncle were huge drinkers. My dad drank, but not like them. But anyway, and I remember I said, "Let me try that," and I was 12. And he gave me a little sip. Not my father was not giving me alcohol, but he let me have a
Yeah.
sip of wine and whatever.
Yeah.
And I went, "Oh, it's bourbon. It tastes so bad." But my next thought was, I know I need to learn to like that because that's what I need to start drinking when I'm an adult at
Yep.
4 or 5 o'clock every day.
Yep.
Because I looked around,
Yep.
my grandmother, all my uncles, the neighbors would come over.
Yep.
Everyone was drinking their mixed drink. And I thought, well, I know I'm supposed to do that. And it's funny because as I grew up and I went through college and drank a ton, but I didn't like it. I
Yeah.
just don't like it. I don't like
Yeah.
alcohol. I don't like how I feel. So
Yeah.
then I stopped altogether. And it's so interesting because I remember thinking, but I'm supposed to, aren't I?
Mhm.
And it was
Yep,
just a
because that's the
program,
example.
right?
It's a programming.
It's
Yeah.
a program.
It's a system. So many of us grow up in systems, right? And the systems have been operating the way they've been operating. And just like you, everybody else there's probably other people at the party like, I don't even like this stuff, but this is the family expectation. This is how we're supposed to show up, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where the patterns are. And as you use but this is why I love the model and I apply it every area of my life when I would go back and I would start seeing certain things and seeing certain patterns, I was like, oh my God, that's so deep in the adolescent. Like y'all are even conscious of what you're doing. Because when you bring it up to people, they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
We don't have a problem. just completely disassociated. Don't
But they
know.
don't slow down enough to check in. And what I hear you saying over and over again, which of course we preach in the program, is slow
Yeah,
down. And when
yeah,
we slow down as humans, you then start becoming more in touch with what you're feeling.
yes,
And
yeah,
hopefully, using this model, people are become aware of, especially in the book, I break it down how you feel
yeah.
emotions. Then you have some idea of how, oh, wait, this is what I need to do. This is how I do it. This is how I do it.
That is what is the book. I have it. I've been listening to it on Audible, and of course, I always have to get the hard copy because I'm a writer and
Yeah.
taking. But it is it. The thing about this model, Michelle, it is literally an introduction to emotions.
Hmm.
People don't feel. You ask people how you feel. I don't know. My favorite statement that I hear oftentimes, I just feel some type of way. Well, what is that way? I don't know. Because we're not taught to feel. Most of us have been so projected out of our bodies through
Hmm.
childhood experiences, through traumas, big traumas, little traumas, that we're not present. So to even tell somebody to slow down, that can be, that in and of itself can be triggering, because most people are on autonomic, right?
Yeah.
Auto, fight or flight, whatever their thing is. But when you get a chance to sit with people, I spoke at a women's event a couple weeks ago, and one of the questions closing out, the young lady asked me, how do you slow down and not feel guilty? How do I slow down and not produce and not feel like I'm being lazy? And so I slowed the whole room down. It's like they were like, everybody was like,
Ooh.
yes, how do you do this? Because we were talking about being unapologetic about disconnecting. She's like, but how do you do this without feeling like you're lazy or feeling like yes? So let's slow this down. I was like, okay, let's slow this down, because it seemed like everybody had a similar question. I said, so ask me your question again. So she asked her the question again. I said, now I'm going to counter your question with a question. I said, who told you you were lazy for slowing down?
Ooh.
She she just was like, I'm going to turn this microphone off now because we don't need to. I said, you don't have to. Then I slowed her down. I said, who told
Yeah.
you that? I said, and not just who told you that. I said, but when you feel lazy, when you feel like if I don't produce, I'm lazy, how old do you feel?
Hmm.
She said 10. I said, what
Mm.
happened at 10? I said, you don't have to tell me, you don't have to tell us, but it's something you might want to sit with,
Yeah.
right? And so even just little ways of introducing people to, it's there. People know. Every one of us has intuition. Every single one of us,
Yeah.
as long as you are breathing,
Yeah.
that intuition is there. It
Mhm.
is reteaching that child how to do what it automatically knew to do when it got here. I started getting into breath work, and one of my coaches was explaining to me why babies sleep so well. She's like, to sleep like a baby. It's because they belly breathe. They breathe
Mm.
from their belly, right?
Mhm.
But as they get older, the systems around them force them out of that belly breathing. And then we start breathing shallow breathing, which is part of why we're disconnected from ourselves. So to even be able to just slow somebody down in a question like that, to get them to then go back, I'm going to counter your question with a question, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It it opens up a door that says there's something else there. And I think as
Mhm.
coaches, that's part of our job, is to open up that door, is to crack open that door a little bit to say, there's something else here. There's something else in me. I'm not this, all that I'm seeing that they told me all these boxes to check and do this and don't,
Mhm.
something's off. And I think we're just at a beautiful time where we're in an energy where people are being reintroduced to themselves and
Yeah.
reintroduced to their bodies in a new way. And I would just encourage anybody to ride the wave. And if you're new to it, this is a beautiful place to start, is using this model. And from the inner child to the adolescent and to the adult, it's very simple and a lot of aha moments using it.
Mm. Gosh. Thank you so much. This was so good. I love hearing how people are using this in their lives. And that's why I wanted to have you on so you could share to hopefully inspire others and give them ideas on, oh my gosh, I can use this in my life in this way. So, LaShonda, thank you. Where would people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Sure, you can find me on my website. It's a newlifestorycoaching.com, or on social media at A New Life Story Coach. And then I also have a podcast, which is A New Life Story, and it's on all the platforms. And similar to you, Michelle, I use this model there. And even when I have guests on, we incorporate the model with the variety of different guests, whether we're talking about with a therapist down to a somatic meditation coach or even a bibliotherapist, that was a really fun conversation and bringing the model together with bibliotherapy. So any one of those platforms, feel free to reach out.
We'll put all that in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. You're doing such beautiful work in the world. We're lucky to have you.
Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.